Yeah, I think on Instagram we have like an hour, I think.
Yeah.
For the time, and after that you have to start a new one. So,
Yeah.
mashallah. Um, yeah, that's what I was saying. That on there, it's like they've given a particular structure on their website, and I think that's interesting because you can't do everything, even as an imam or as a female resident scholar. I think on there, I can't remember if I think it was family therapy or there was a certain type of therapy. They were like, look, this is not the imam's role, or not the imam's role, that the imam is,
Yeah.
not that basically. And there's certain, I think they had like links to websites that they were like, if you need this, you can be pointed in that direction. And I thought that was interesting because, again, naturally you think you have to do everything, and it's not nice for the imam or that person, because you're at the beck and call of people.
Yeah.
People assume you're going to do everything, and they come to you with that mindset, and then when you turn them away, it's like they take it personally, and it's like, why is the imam turning me away? And they don't think. So I remember on that website, Cambridge Central Mosques, they put the imam's time is important, and you have to book an appointment. But then there's certain things that he will discuss, and there's certain things that he won't discuss. And people don't realize that the imam's the manager, or he's the head, or the management committee, they're the head, and they're in charge of management, and the choice and the decision rests with them, and they control in what direction and what they're going to discuss. I think that's important for management, that people realize the imam, he's in charge of his own life, and he decides, and if he doesn't feel comfortable with a certain thing, that's it. That's done.
I think like that's the thing. Sometimes it's like you say, like some people don't actually realize, like as an imam or like an ustadhah or whatever, like you are also your own person. You also have like your own limits and your own boundaries, and there's certain things that you won't go into, certain things that you will do, and to a certain degree, like you kind of go through this experience, especially if someone has like your number or whatever, or you have kind of out of hours number or whatever, and where people call you like incessantly, like you know what I mean? So sometimes like you kind of get to the point where it's like you don't have any personal time, like the time is not your own. But like sometimes, like as an imam or as an ustad or whatever, you need just a small amount of time just to kind of reground yourself, because I think like being in that role, it's very important to be grounded, like because if you're ungrounded in your situation, you're going to have a massive impact on the people that you're dealing with. So I think sometimes people don't realize, like, in order for communities to be functioning healthily, like people that they are turning to who are seen as role models in the community or authorities in the community, they need to be grounded, and they need to be stable.
100%. And plus, as much as you want to say that the imam's a human being, as ajeeb that statement is when you say it out loud, that's a reality, and likewise for female scholars as well. And personality.
In the community, there's created. Sorry, I just totally cut you off. I'm so sorry. I think like because sometimes like in the communities, there's this kind of expectation plus culture that's been created that the imam or the ustadhah is seen as something other than being human. So like saying that statement, like the imam is a human too, the ustadhah is a human too, it does sound quite, funny saying it out loud.
Yeah, I always mention it, and I'm like, as ajeeb as it is to say it out loud, just to make an actual explicit point of that is ajeeb to say that. But alhamdulillah, I think personality comes into it, personal preference comes into it, and obviously time comes into it. And so those are some of the things that people don't talk about. It's almost, I think the imam has been seen as like this public figure kind of thing, and the way we think about public figures is like they're just 24/7 accessible, and you know, they can do everything and so on and so forth. So I mean, that kind of stereotype is filtered into the Muslim community as well,
Yeah.
and that role. I don't know how long we've been talking for, but we do have actually, you know, another topic to talk about. But
Yeah.
I think just, I think you mentioned, just we'll talk a little bit about the challenges, and then we'll move into female accommodation in the Muslim community. Yeah, what were some of the challenges that you faced as, you know, as a female resident scholar dealing with predominantly females?
I think it was quite interesting, like, because you had you had your community, as in, like, there was people who only wanted to speak to females, like, you know, who only felt comfortable, like, dealing with this situation or whatever it is that they're going through, dealing with a female. And then in that case, if you didn't really have quite all the expertise to manage that, you'd always have to go back and forth with a third party being like a middle person. So a lot of the time you could find yourself being a middle person in a situation. And then there was certain times as well where actually you used to, this is a minority situation. This is, like, as I say this, it's not overly common, but it is a thing, and it is something I've even heard other female students of knowledge even mention, that sometimes dealing with certain pockets of the community, you can get a lot of backlash off other women, like, or treated badly from other women, you know, who maybe don't necessarily accept what you say. Like, I've had, you know, I've had instances where I've had to speak to, you know, either parents or whatever other women for whatever particular reason, or I've had to convey a message or whatever, and it's been received quite negatively, like, you know, or it's received, like, you know, and the feedback that I've got off, like, you know, I've been verbally abused and everything. Like, you know, I've, you know, taken a lot of slack in certain places. And then, like, my male colleague comes along, sometimes, like, my male colleague comes along, tells them the exact same thing, like, the exact same thing that I have maybe just said, like, 5 minutes previous, that, like, you know, maybe I was getting it in the neck for, says the exact same thing, and it's like, oh, okay, Sheikh, okay, mom, that's fine. And it's just like, what? So sometimes you have to, you know, there's those moments where you have those challenges, or I've been in
I had
certain,
the same, but not being a female. It was
you know,
being young. So
yeah,
like,
like,
I
either
remember
it's like being young or it's been a woman.
speaking with certain parents. It was like, and I remember the committee had to be called in, and it was like I'd literally said the same thing, and I even said it to that person. They were like,
Yeah,
I said the same thing to you, and she just looked at me like, I was like, yeah, clearly it's not going to, you know, it's not going to be understood and received. I remember I just
yeah,
turned to the kitchen. I was like, I was saying that to her for the last hour, and you've had to come. It's just a waste of time. But
yeah.
yeah, it
It's
is what
just
it
like,
is.
yeah. I mean, it's quite funny sometimes how communities, like, different people in the community react to you either because you're young or you're a woman or whatever. And I think that one of the things that's, like, one of the challenges in that is learning not to take it personal, because sometimes it can feel personal, and you really need to learn to be like, okay, this is not a personal thing. This is more
Yeah,
about
no, it's just reality.
them.
But in
Mm,
situations like that,
mm,
obviously, I think is the first instance sometimes time get wasted. Like me, for example, now looking back at that hindsight, it's
mm.
just, I mean, if you really wanted to speak to a committee member, you don't need to, you know, insult me or whatever it
Yeah,
is. I mean, not that I don't take it personally. I don't,
yeah,
it doesn't affect me anyway, but it's just, you know, you're wasting my time, I'm wasting your time. There's a waste of time, and
yeah,
then you're bringing in another person. Obviously, first of all, you know, they've
yeah,
given me that I'm in that position. You should respect it professionally. That's one bad etiquette.
yeah,
Secondly, if okay, now not only are you not listening to me and respecting my authority and my, you know, professionalism or my profession, you then want to speak to someone else. But it's like, just mention that first, innit?
Yeah,
So I
it's just
mean, just
like
5 or 10 minutes into it, just say,
oh
look, just
yeah,
tell me who your line manager is, tell me who's above
mm,
you. You'd be like, fine, come down, sort it out, gone. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying?
yeah,
Rather than
absolutely. Like
rather than it escalating, it's just
yeah.
you
Yeah, because
know,
like obviously it depends on your personality as well. Like if you take it personally or whatever. Like because sometimes when you're just new to the situation, or you're just like newly involved, sometimes you can take it personally, and it's like it's not personal at all. But there's just it's like you say, there's a lot of like time wasting or whatever going on. It's like it didn't need to get to this place.
yeah,
It's
no,
like
100%.
yeah,
It's like, yeah, it's just part and parcel of the work life.
yeah.
Any other instances that come to mind or experiences that you've had?
Oh yeah, like I mean, some of the challenges like I've had like just in my own personal dealing with that. So obviously there was that situation, but also I've also been in spaces where I've been invited to speak, like, speak to, in front of my peers, like, or my colleagues, imams and different things. And I've had, like, imams get up and walk out because they their own personal reasons, like they didn't feel it was appropriate for either me to be speaking or
Is it like a
whatever.
public gathering, I'm assuming? Like a community
Yeah,
gathering?
like like a public gathering, like one of these kind of like I've had instances like where I've came and been invited for an event for like the Muslim Council. So sometimes, like in the Muslim Council, you
So your
have these events where
audience is like, this is like a
the
mixed
audience,
event you're talking about. So it's
yeah,
like a
like
public, yeah.
so, like you usually tend to find in these kind of events, like you'll have the imams, but the imams will bring their wives along as well. So that it's not kind of like you're just there speaking purposely to men.
But if it's a
Um,
public event, I think that the
yeah,
hukum is different anyway,
yeah.
as far as I'm aware.
So like some people some people take certain positions, and that's fine. That's like up to them. But I think like sometimes like as a woman in that position of like holding your own in a very male dominated you know circle,
Mm.
because like if we think about it, like you know Islamic scholarship is, especially in this country at least, like especially in the UK, is much more of a kind of male dominated arena. And and for the most part, for me in my experience, like mashallah, like I have been like 100% supported, 100% like put out there like by my colleagues, and like just genuinely from the bottom of their hearts, from the sake of Allah, they've believed in me, they've trusted me, they've put their trust in me, and they've put me in certain positions for me to deal with certain things or whatever, and I have been truly supported. But you get the odd kind of time where you get just a little bit of like snap back for a situation, or somebody believes that maybe you shouldn't be in that position, um, which comes up because like maybe they take like a more stricter interpretation of a ruling, or whatever, and that's fine, like that's okay, like you can't let things like that bother you, but it does sometimes become a challenge. Like so for me, my personal experience, for the most part, I have definitely been supported by my male counterparts, and I have been supported, defended, whatever, from my male counterparts, alhamdulillah. um, but you do get the odd time where you get something kind of flung back at you, or you get someone who maybe objects to your presence in a certain thing, or just not because of you or who you are in your scholarship, but just with the fact that they've taken a stricter interpretation of a ruling or whatever. And so sometimes it's navigating that minefield sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, mashallah. I think, alhamdulillah, it's, yeah, but I think if it's a public gathering, I don't know. Yeah, bukhair, anyway, regardless of that.
Regardless, I mean, people. Like, and as I say, imams are people as well. So you'll get some who'll take like a much more stricter interpretation. I'm just like, okay, that's cool. We in public, but it happens. It is something that happens.
So I think that question, alhamdulillah, brings us nicely to, um, yeah, but again, it's, just quickly on that, it's a learning experience, and it's part and parcel of the, you know, the professional life. And obviously,
Yeah.
I think we're going to talk about this in the next section as well. But I think that being a female scholar, it is new. So I think as time goes on, inshallah, those things will become easier, and you know there
Oh
won't be
yeah,
problems anymore.
absolutely. Because there's definitely a space for it, and there's definitely a need for it. So inshallah, like as it kind of grows, you know, because when we look at like female scholarship, like what is female scholarship? You know, and female scholarship is not too different to male scholarship in the sense it's learning either from a series of individual teachers or an institute, graduating from either that institute or going through the procedures those individual teachers have set for you till you get to that level of, you know, to where you're able to display to them that you are more than qualified or more than
Yeah, capable to not teach. Yeah.
capable, yes, capable of like transmitting that knowledge. In that sense, like female scholarship is not too different from male scholarship. However, like it comes around in different ways. Like, you know, certain things in female scholarship is different from male scholarship, and you find that as you kind of go through you know, that working experience of what it is. And if you think about female scholarship as a whole, female scholarship as a whole is not something that is new. If you look at it in a whole, like, you know, some scholars would argue that the very, very first female scholar was Sayyidah Aisha radiallahu anha, who found herself, you know, teaching Sahabi. Um, you know, so there is a massive tradition of female scholarship in different places, like, you know, Yemen, Africa, and different places. But I think, like, in terms of like the UK, even though necessarily it's not something that is completely new, because there are many, mashallah, there are many qualified, amazing female scholars in this country. You know, most of them are very, very low key, like mashallah. Um, they exist and they've existed for quite some time, but I think now it's coming more to the forefront. It's new in terms of how kind of more open it's becoming, more the forefront it's becoming now, in terms of female scholarship. So I think, like in this country, it's in the beginnings of gaining more traction. You find that there's more women interested in getting involved in the Islamic sciences and learning the Islamic sciences now.
Hmm. Yeah. So alhamdulillah, that brings us on to uh, female scholarship and uh, female accommodation within that. But yeah, no, alhamdulillah, I think would you say there's a space for it for
Oh,
female
of course.
scholarship? I mean, I know the
Yeah.
answer to that, but
Yeah,
just in case you think that I don't think there is a space.
I know. Like, no, there's definitely a space. There's definitely a space for it. Like, that space might not be what we expect it to look like, but there is definitely a space for for female Islamic scholarship. There is definitely a space for it, and I think personally, there's a need for it, and I don't mean it in terms of um, maybe women being, you know, all the way out there, as in like as publicly as some of our brothers in that situation, or some of the imams in that situation. Um, but there is definitely a need for female scholarship and female role models within Muslim female spaces. There is definitely a space for
Yeah,
it, and there's definitely a
I
need
think
for it, I think.
definitely there's a space for it, um, and alhamdulillah, I think to my knowledge, or not the only one, but you know, someone who has been appointed as a female resident resident scholar. And I remember whilst I was, just to give my own experience, whilst I was in charge or the imam at the mosque that I was in, there were two female sisters who were teaching, obviously, during the 5 to 7 classes, and both of them had finished their Alamiya courses, mashallah. And the moment I found that, I was like, okay, that's it, you're going to be doing the classes for the females and so on and so forth. So I think in a society, my answer to that question would be, I think in a society where females are part and parcel of society, religion doesn't want to be left behind. And I don't think it's necessarily a case of haram and halal and looking at it explicitly as simple as that. I think in a liberal society, not to say that you need to fit in to be liberal, but I think there's an opportunity there. I think that's the key word and the key perspective, that there's an opportunity for sisters to learn, and that should be facilitated for them. I don't think the mosque should be the only place that misses out on facilitating for women, having female classes. So when we're talking about it in that way. It's not that the Sharia goes out the window and, you know, we're liberal outside the boundaries of Islam. Not really, but I think there's maqasid of the religion, and, you know, you have to be wise, you have to understand where your society is, and that means, you know, doing things which are relevant and making sure that the religion remains relevant. And if you have a strict interpretation of haram and halal, very quickly you'll find that you'll have no congregation left. So it's not always about haram and halal.
It's like, you know, one of my teachers always used to say, like, women become the first madrasas for children in reality, right? And we're not even just talking about just for children, but it's like, going what you said as well, it's like women are a part of our society, and you can't like just have this kind of group of like highly educated brothers within Islam. Okay, that's great, mashallah, but you need to bring the women along with you, like, you know what I mean? Because they complement each other, they balance each other out. Like, you know, both sides need to be educated within the deen. Both sides need that tarbiyah. Both sides need to. It's like, basically, it's just what you said. Like, both sides need that, and you know, women are very much part of society. They're very much part of they're part of it. But also as well now, like when you look at the time we're in, there's more and more presence of women outside the home, in careers, in university, in schools, doing like, you know, so there has to be some
common sense
in place. There has to be something in place, like, you know, because not everyone's going to get to study abroad, so there has to be, you know, courses facilitated, there has to be places facilitated for it, because in the end it's like, if we are not the ones there to educate, or if we're not the ones taking part in that growth in our ummah, they're going to find their information, they're going to find their tarbiyah from somewhere else, and it's not always going to be conducive to their spiritual or emotional well-being, or who they are.
I think that's mashallah. I think it's true that obviously we do have a sense of responsibility, you know, generally speaking, within the Sunni community to make institutes and so on and so forth, and inshallah provide the spaces for females to come in and learn as well as males, so we can have scholars from both sides of the community. So Khadijah, obviously we've established now that there's a space for female scholarship, and what female scholarship looks like, that in essence, in terms of what a female scholar is very similar to what a male scholar is, in terms of the formal qualifications and the route that they take, and their formal studies. But where would you say female scholarship is at the moment? You know, yourself as an example of someone who has been fortunate, I would say, alhamdulillah, that you have been a female resident scholar, given a lot of authority and support, I would say. So commenting from a place of experience, but also someone in that field, I would say, in that area.
I mean, I would say it's in the beginning stages of becoming more at the forefront. Because the reality is, like, as much as we have very, very many amazing female scholars working locally at a local level, there are also many other women who have studied, maybe studied abroad, maybe studied in whatever institute, even within the UK or whatever, or completed courses or whatever, who have not been able to get their foot in the door in terms of transmitting what they've learned or being present within that for whatever reason. And I think this is the thing, like, if you have been qualified in something, if you have that qualification and permission from your teachers that you have acquired that, even in any capacity which you can do, even if it's something small, I think it's important, like, to jump on board, get involved in whatever way you can. Like, if you have that little bit of time or that qualification, whatever it may be in, because right now I feel like it's in the beginning of something. Like, I think female scholarship is at the beginning of something.
Yeah, I think.
It's starting to make a change, I think.
Yeah,
Because for a
go
long
on.
time it's been very low key. Because we've had, like, we've had a lot of female scholars, but it's been very low key. But now it's gaining more traction.
Yeah,
Like, you get like Darazara in Liverpool and stuff like that. There's more traction being gained there.
yeah, I think the landscape at the moment in terms of a female graduate is limited in that the religious field. I remember just what's coming to my mind now is just some of the conversations with the female contingent in whilst I was a student in Cambridge Muslim College as well, just hearing them and what their experiences were, and it's difficult to get a job in the religion per se. I mean, you're not going to get a female resident scholar in every mosque. You're not going to get a female position, full-time position in a mosque. I mean, that's generally speaking in the Sunni community is unheard of, and it's probably raise eyebrows if you bring that into the conversation. That's where it's at. But at the same time, there's examples like yourself, Sada Sophia, Sheikh Sophia, and I'm sure there's others who I can't recall, who are, mashallah, active in the public sector. So I think right now, you can go into research because it's a gender neutral, welcoming environment. It's not necessarily an Islamic environment. You probably go into chaplaincy. Outside of that, I mean, you could probably go into media relations and take a career path in teaching. But I think that in essence, they're probably your main fears at the moment. But saying that, like they say, when something's not there, there's an opportunity. And again, I think people like yourself are pioneers, in my opinion, in changing that conversation and meandering and actually leading the community in that direction of opening up that conversation. So you've and Imam Hassan, mashallah, in appointing you, has really led the way, because I think the more we hear about those things, the more we talk about these things, the more these examples are made known to people, then it's like, oh, okay, then the female scholars exist, and other mosques will then say, okay, mashallah. I remember you mentioned that once people heard about yourself and other mosques were interested, and one mosque became 4 or 5 mosques. So in the same way, obviously one female can't do everything, but it's other graduates are there in that locality. It's okay, mashallah. It creates an awareness, it creates an interest, and that's essentially what you want to do. Once you create that interest, the rest, mosques will they'll follow suit, and inshallah there'll be more positions. So I think it's at a good place, and I think there is a place for it. But I think conversation like this are important. Bringing females into that circle, really welcoming them in, making them feel a part and parcel of the management, of the whole service process. You know, I just touch upon it here, but I think we'll touch upon the next part, inshallah. But I think Ustadhah Khadijah, as someone who sat on a council, I think for females, in terms of health and well-being, and also your experiences with the female Muslim community, and as you know, in your work capacity of female resident scholar, what would you say are the main areas where women can be facilitated? Actually, what are the challenges that women face first, and then inshallah we can talk about how they can be accommodated further.
I mean, in a physical sense, like, you've got accessibility, which is one that keeps coming up again and again and again, because you do have masjids who do have women's spaces, but they're not being utilised the way that they should be utilised. And then you have maybe problems with accessibility sometimes for women to speak to an authority, to even speak to the local imam. Sometimes, I mean, I've heard from many sisters, like, alhamdulillah, like, in Zia Quran we never like really had that issue, but like, I've heard from like many other sisters, like, one of the big issues that they face is that accessibility, that sometimes you need to speak to about 3 or 4 different people in the committee before you can, you know, even get an audience for the imam, you know. You know, never mind like the visiting like sheikhs that come, like, sometimes that's a whole other story. And I think like that's one of the main problems, because the thing is, we want women to also feel attached to our religious spaces. So that's one of the biggest challenges that come up, like, in a physical sense. You know, not having that accessibility. Like, some places don't have places for females, or if they do have places for females, they're not always, don't get me wrong, there's some masjids doing some amazing work, but they're not all. There's some masjids out there who are not utilising their female spaces as they should be, and that becomes a bit of an issue, and that can turn into, you know, women feeling like they're not really part of anything because they don't have that necessarily attachment to a religious space. And some women really kind of crave that religious space, you know, and that can turn into other things. And I think that another thing that's important is, like, you know, the spiritual well-being, you know, which can take place through tarbiyah. But yeah, I think probably mostly like the physical aspect, and like the taking care of the spiritual well-being of the women in our community.
Any examples that come to mind, or instances?
Not particularly right off the top of my head, but because, like, you know, women have such a place in the society that if they are turned away from religious spaces, if they are spiritually not invested, like, they're not being invested in spiritually, it can really affect the lens in which they use to view Allah. And when that lens that the, like, you know, it can be the same for anybody, not just women. I'm not saying that that's a women exclusive issue, right? Because it can be the same for brothers as well. But when a person's lens that they use to view Allah becomes cracked and it becomes cloudy, it starts to become an issue. It starts to become an issue not just privately for themselves, but it can start to become an issue at a community level, especially like within their own families or whatever. So this is, like, you know, and in terms of women, like, women you know, have so much like, as women, we have so much different views, like within the community, or different positions within the community. There's different, women become mothers, they become friends, they become sisters, they become close companions, and if we start, like, not investing in the spiritual well-being of the woman, that she is connected to Allah, then that she has that love for Allah, and that through her love for Allah, that she wants to, uphold the Sharia in the way that it should be, in whatever lens that takes place, in whatever view that takes place, it can start to become a problem, because it can start to affect other people within the community as well. And again, that's not just something that's exclusive to women, or just like a women's problem, but it can become a bigger issue within the female community, because you'll find that maybe they're not being attached to those religious authorities, or they're not being attached to those religious spaces, which to them are examples of how they can get closer to Allah, because that's
I think
something.
the outcome or the effect of that is like a spiritual, just, it's like, it's a depravity, isn't it? Really, you're deprived of spirituality, and obviously that's not gender exclusive. It's across both genders. But Ustadhah Khadijah, coming now to female accommodation. So on the back of that, I think the next most logical question, obvious question, is where can females be accommodated for?
It depends on what they're looking for, really. If it's like in terms of being attached to a religious space and for religious learning, there is space for it. Like, I've seen that there is, like, spaces where women have been accommodated, and I've seen it even like in an international level as well, where I've studied in different places. If women have called upon needing a space for a particular thing, the imam sorts it out, and it's kind of like, it's done. In terms of like female accommodation, it is there, and it does exist. Sometimes it just needs to be managed a little bit better. Sometimes it just needs to be utilised a little bit better. But it is definitely something that's there, and it's definitely something it continues, like, continue to work on it, because it's not just a case of providing the space, because the space can be provided for. It's also about sort of almost changing the mindset slightly within the parameters of the Sharia, of course, but changing that kind of mindset, as in, like, here is this space, because sometimes you'll find places who have space and who have accommodations for women, but the women themselves are not utilising it because they don't have that attachment to that place. So I think it's like a slow process of also changing the mindset, as well as continually working on to provide even more accommodation for females to come and learn and to become and be an active part of the Ummah.
Yeah, I also think, just to add to that, and inshallah contribute to that question, I think there's a few things really. I think one thing is that there should be structural change. Well, I think the first thing I'll begin by saying that there's a inclination towards religion, which is again not gender exclusive. Young males have that, young females have that, and I think that's the husn of that we should have. That's a good opinion that we should have of our community. That there are people who wish to listen to things like this and wish to listen to the Imam speaking on the Jummah khutbah. And you'll be surprised. Like, I remember when I was the Imam and we began live streaming our Jummahs, we had a really good online presence and an online number. And, people who couldn't watch it because they were at work, they began watching it. during the lunch break. And I remember when I heard that feedback, it's like, again, mashallah, people are taking out their time, or they watch it afterwards, because you can watch it over the weekend. I mean, 100%, people will take out an hour. It's not even an hour, it's half an hour to listen to a Jummah khutbah on the weekend. And again, I think we shouldn't say that, the youth are a particular way, and, the disenfranchised and the disengaged, and
I think, I mean, that's totally, I think that's totally, like, you say, like, the youth are disenfranchised and whatever. Like, I think, like, like you said, there needs to be more husn because what is the thing that people are really seeking? Like, even non-Muslims themselves seek it. It's that they don't know it, but it's that closeness to the Lord. Like, I've worked with so many young people, so many young people, like, from all different backgrounds, and even young people, young Muslim guys who describe themselves as roadmen or whatever, right? Like, I've, like, I've worked with those guys, and, like, when you get down to the core of it, they do want their religion. They do want, they want Allah. Like, people want Allah, even if they don't realize it straight away. And I think that's the thing. It's like having that accommodation, like you say, live streaming, like your Jummah khutbahs, or doing this or doing that. There's so many ways that you can get through to so many people, because in the reality of the situation is people want Allah. People do want Allah. People want to be involved in their religion, and they want to have that closeness, because without that closeness, they feel a sense of emptiness that they try and fill it with other things. So, of course, there's only so much imams, ustadhas, or whatever in the communities can do, but there's still things that we can do to help those people find their way, if that's what they choose. Because even I hear a lot of the time from, like, different shuyukh that say most of their students are females. Like, a lot of them will say a lot of my students are females. A lot of them will say a lot of my students are young guys. Like, in, like, Zia al-Quran, for instance, as well, like, Imam Hassan has a lot of, like, young teenage men who look up to him, because he gives them that thing that they need. He draws them closer towards Allah. And even myself, like, even now that I'm not necessarily in an active teaching mode, I'm mostly living abroad. I'm mostly living in Mauritania and studying. I still get phone calls from my previous students. Like, I still get a phone call from them. They still text me, and it's not just like a case of, oh, hi Ustadhah, how are you? It's like a case of, Ustadhah, I'm stuck, I don't know what I'm doing. Or, Ustadhah, what is it, like, what is the ruling in this? What is this? Like, they're reaching out. And it's important that when they're reaching out, there's someone there to take them up on that.
Yeah, to reach out to. 100%. So I think that's the first thing, really, is that just having a good opinion of people.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you another thing as well, and just recognizing that the Muslim community generally, gender, regardless of gender, that there's a willingness, there's a recognition, and there's an inclination towards a religion. If it's presented to them, people will take it. And I generally think amongst, even someone who may be engaging in certain things that a quote-unquote religious person might not be engaging with, you'll be surprised. Like, if you mention something to them, it'll melt their heart. They begin crying and so on and so forth. Because there's a relationship that they have with their soul, regardless of where they are. Sincere people, and majority of people are sincere people, and I think we forget that. But also, that's the first thing. I'll just mention very quickly an example for myself, and this is an example I often give to people, and in conversations like this, that I actually was an imam at this time. I was just a student, and I just thought I'd do a Jummah khutbah, etc. And I didn't send a message out, so I just did the Jummah khutbah. See one of my friends is local. I'm from Burton, so just local in one of the local mosques, and I said to him, just genuinely, he's one of the childhood friend I've grown up with, gone to school with, and for a long time. I said to him, yo, I didn't say yo, but I said, like, how was the talk, basically? And he was like, what talk? So I said, I just did Jummah, bro. Like, come on, like, how was the talk? And he's like, listen to what he said. He said, I come at the end because I don't understand Urdu. So he said, had you told me, I would have come 20 minutes earlier. And that for me was like a reference. That's a reference for me now. Like, I'll mention that because that for me, it resonated that I don't consider myself to be the best speaker, the most eloquent speaker, the most intelligent, so on and so forth, the most sincere and pious. At the end of the day, so when he said that to me, it was like, okay, like he's interested. And even the person who said that was important because he wasn't, as far as I'm aware at that time, I knew him pretty well. Like he wasn't praying at that time. He's not really in the religious circles, but he was a sincere person, and I noticed that within him. And he was like, look, I would have come. And that to me shows that right? Allah says in the Quran that we did not send any messenger. Every messenger we sent them in to speak the language and to communicate in the language to whom they've been sent.
Yeah.
And then Allah says, tells you even the reason so that they can explain things to them. So this idea that you speak the language of your people, that's part and parcel, or should be part and parcel of the fabric of community and society. And that message, when it's given in English, is readily received and people are receptive to that. That's the first thing I think. Another thing is, I think one thing that needs to be mentioned is structural changes. And then that's one thing actually. And then another thing is that people are, I wouldn't say disenfranchised, but I would say they're disengaged because when they've tried, I'm talking about like sincere women, sisters, and they've tried to engage and so on, and they feel they're frustrated and they're disenfranchised because it's like they've given up in essence, or they've closed that door. So disenfranchised from that perspective. And obviously that brings on to the question, okay, why does that happen? But then it's the management. So they're not being accommodated for. So I think there's something to say about management. There's something to say about that needs to be changed in the perception, the mentality of people in religious circles. And this conversation is, inshallah, a stepping stone to that process. And inshallah, Allah facilitate them more and grant that success. But I think in committees also, you need diversity of age. And in my opinion, there should be structural changes. Like, again, you look at any organization now, you have female, boards or councils or, management, even if there's not separate, but there's diversity of gender, right? So either you have diversity of gender within the committees, or you have a separate female sub-council or a subcommittee, and you give them an element of autonomy, and then there's one person that they're dealing with. Just a simple idea like that will have so much effect filtering down at the the grassroots level, where people don't have to worry about being accommodated for. They know there's people, there's sisters, 4 or 5 sisters, or that they can get access to, and they will know that what they want to do will materialize. That will then recreate trust, and inshallah, it'll be a big step, I think, in that process.
Yeah, 100%. Like, definitely. There is that, that structure, like, because the thing is, like, communities need that. They need that, like, structure. They need that difference in them, because, like, it'll help. It's like you say, like, I don't think I can really add to anything of which you said, because, like, mashallah, like, you said it all. But that structural change is definitely needed, like, because sometimes, like, you get people, like, I mean, I've heard it all the time, like, I've had sisters, like, there's so many stories that I could tell you, like, off the back of what sisters have told me about their experience, like, within certain spaces, that either they've been sent away, or they've been, they've just kind of like been blanked, or they've been just told very firmly and very rudely, like, they don't have a place there or whatever. And that becomes an issue. Like, that becomes a massive issue.
Or they're not listened to.
The
question's not important.
Or they're not listened to, like, so that also becomes a situation where they're not listened to. And, and sometimes you have, committees, mashallah, like, I think, like, have husn adhan, there's a level of husn adhan, but sometimes some committees, kind of run their masjids like, it's just for them. You get, like, certain little masjids or whatever.
But that's the thing, it comes down to diversity again. Diversity of age and diversity of gender.
Yeah.
Or at least diversity of age.
Yeah, like, I mean, I think you definitely need that because, there is a certain wisdom that we can gain from our elders. There is that definite wisdom. But there's also a wisdom that we can take from our youth as well. And definitely,
the older you get, you become more set in your ways.
Yeah.
It's very different. I mean, so in essence, what you're saying is the root cause of that is because you've got, a certain demography of people or demography of people who are managers, who are managing the mosques, and obviously anything outside of that isn't going to naturally be welcome because it's not part of the mentality, if you get what I mean. So just having, a few people from the second generation, and in a local mosque I have, alhamdulillah, give the example, Allah protect them and bless them, inshallah. They have some elders, and they have that diversity. Like my friend who was in my school class, my school year, mashallah. He's part on the mosque, and it's a great source of pride for us, mashallah. And we had du'as with him. And then there's other people who I've grown up with 5 or 10 years older, and then maybe 5 years older than them. So alhamdulillah, you have a good 15 to 20 year age diversity. And it's good. That's what you need. And remember, Sayyidina Ali was young, and the majority of the Sahaba were young. They give you the energy, but the wisdom comes from the elders. Again, but who is the elder? The Prophet was obviously the most intelligent. So you need the best people, really. And you need people who are intelligent and people who are active.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the thing is, because the thing is, the reality of the situation, the masjid doesn't belong to any one person or any group of people. Like, the masjid is the house of Allah. So in the house of Allah, we have to take it from that prophetic example about how the house of Allah is. So that means, accommodating for brothers, accommodating for sisters, accommodating for our elders, accommodating for our youth, and what we can possibly do within our means. And it's not it's not that it belongs to any one person or any one group. I think sometimes that's where we fall into a pitfall. Like you say, this mosque is like such and such a mosque, or that's that kind of mosque, or that's that kind of mosque, and we're within that kind of becomes an issue, because actually no, it's not. Like, the purpose of the house of Allah is a house of Allah, and the house of Allah should be the center for the people. You know what I mean? Like, this should be the centre for the people. Okay, you might have your preferred imams or your preferred female scholars or whatever else, but the house of Allah is a house of Allah, and it's not for just any set group of people. Within that Muslim community, and within that, they need to be able to accommodate. They need to be able to give space within their means that they possibly can. And I think that's the point. And I think if we have that structural change, and we have that kind of diversity, within our committees, I think you'll find that will be much more able to come about and be something that's more common. But it's a project. It's a project. It's a continually changing project, and there are changes being made, albeit maybe they might be small ones. But Rome was never built in a day. So, patience. صبر الجميل. صبر الجميل.
Inshallah, we'll end with dua, inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا مولانا محمد وبارك وسلم وسلم عليه. Oh Allah, we ask you through our sheikhs and our teachers, also for Qibla Sasa, Qibla Sufi Sahib, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and your mercy and generosity, Ya Ilahana. Astaghfirullah, Allahumma ghfir lana dhunubana ya Ghafar, Allahumma arham lana ya Rahman. Oh Allah, we pray that you forgive us for all of our sins, that you bless us all, that you shower mercy and blessings upon us within our righteous intentions, that you grant us wus'an and barakah, that you open for us all doors of mercy, that you grant us success, and that you remove from us all mushkilat, and you grant us ease, Ya Ilahana. We also pray that, alhamdulillah, we thank you for today, and inshallah, to the barakah of today and the barakah of this time, that you, oh Allah, that you presented to the Prophet ﷺ, that you make it means of khair and rahmah and barakah for all those who passed away from Sayyidina Adam ﷺ until now, that you make it means of khair for this community, for Burton and Glasgow, and inshallah, beyond that, inshallah, Allah, that you bless all those who are watching. Inshallah, it's a means of benefit and fa'idah. Oh Allah, we pray that you, in general, within our lives, you grant us the same, and what we've talked about, that you grant us wasa and barakah, and inshallah, we are your servants, oh Allah, and this is your system, inshallah, and we pray that you bless us within that, where we are weak, that you grant us strength, and that you grant us your tawfiq, and you grant us your divine facilitation, inshallah, and that sisters are welcomed and they are looked after and taken care of, inshallah, and everyone likewise, inshallah. Allah bless you, Sister Khadijah, mashallah, and your family, and Imam Hassan and his father, inshallah. I'll see him soon in Spain, inshallah. Wa sallallahu wa sallam. And inshallah, all those who watch this, my parents, my family, and your and inshallah everyone, and if anyone is ill, Allah grant them shifa. If anyone has any experiences, any any serious matters, Allah guide them to someone who can deal with their affairs, and inshallah fulfill that for them in the best way possible. اللهم يا قاضي الحاجات اقضي حاجاتنا، اللهم يا شافي الأمراض اشف أمراضنا، اللهم يا حل المشكلات حل مشكلاتنا. إلهنا, ease for our difficulties, fulfill for us our affairs, and cure us of all of our illnesses and our آمين يا رب. اللهم إنا لا تلاوة القرآن وذكرك والشرك وحسن عبادتك، وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. آمين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. I don't know how long we've been speaking for, but
we've been speaking for time.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you for having me.
Inshallah. Take care, inshallah.
Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.